Hey guys, this is Bart Hanson for Crush Live Poker, and today I want to finally do something that I've been trying to do for quite some time, but I think the time is right. I want to actually go over a bunch of Stones Live Poker hands that Mike Postle played in and weigh in on the controversy with the graphics, the RFID cards, and whether or not he could actually see the hands. The reason why I think that the time is right is because Justin Curitis, who is the TD over at Stones and who basically ran Stones Live Poker, has started to make public comments on Twitter this week, and he seems to deny that any type of wrongdoing or cheating went on this live stream. And I have probably watched more live stream hands than anyone in the world. This is my business. I am certainly an expert on this field. So I'm going to give you my take. And one of the things that I've done is I've actually bucketed hands into different categories. And we're going to go over 20 hands, and 5 or 6 of them are actually new hands as well. One of the other things too that sometimes people will ask is like, well, if he could see the cards, how could he go about doing it? And there's kind of a simple answer to that, that either the live feed on an undelayed signal could have been going out to the floor, or as Matt Berkey had said, and what I learned from TCH Live as I do work for them on a live stream, there's a way to connect to like an IP address where you can actually see the GFX, the graphics, and if you have a password to that IP address, you can see the graphics program in a remote location. You know, when this stuff was first coming out, I was kind of wondering about this, and there's all these sort of, theories about, oh, he had some sort of, jawbone conducting headset in his hat. But from one of the videos that I'm actually going to link in the description, there was a guy that basically said, hey, like, it looks like he can see the feed on his phone. And that's what I'm going to continuously make reference to when he's actually looking down kind of at his crotch, which is basically looking at his phone. But let's get into it here. So it makes sense to do a couple of refresher hands here. So some people may have already seen this particular hands or these hands, but it makes a whole lot of sense. So in this hand, it's going to be all pre-flop, and we're dealing basically with a $45 large straddle from Mike Postle. We get this guy who limps in for the call. Naga picks up ace-king offsuit. He makes it 245, and he also starts with 1,000 less. So that's one of the things that I looked at quite a bit extensively, is looked at the stack sizes. So he actually starts with 1,900. Moneymaker picks up ace-king to his immediate left. He 3-bets to 705. Postle here has 5-4 offsuit and decides to call for whatever reason. And basically it's going to get back over to Naga and playing with a $50 in essence straddle and starting with 2,000. It's a really, really easy shove for him, especially with all the dead money out there. So he's going to think about it for a while and shove. And then, of course, that gives Moneymaker a great, great situation because he can overshove in the middle. So again, it's raise, 3-bet, call, 4-bet, 5-bet all in. And of course, Postle, who should never really be in there from the first place, we just assume that he's just going to fold. But for whatever reason, only getting 2-1, by the way, the pot size is going to show 1K more than it actually is. It's actually 68.34 for him to call. I promise this is the only time that I'm going to do any math or equities, but usually in this case, what you're going to see is 2 high pairs, aces and kings. And you can see that Mike would have about 16% equity. He needs 33, by the way, getting 2-1. The other situation that you'll see would be ace king and a high pair. In that case, Mike is about 19%. And then lastly, in a rare situation, you may see ace king versus ace king. And then, of course, you could see that 4-5 actually has equity. And it's rare because of the combinations of hands. It's just less likely that someone's going to have ace king. But for whatever reason, Mike calls, and they end up actually running the board out twice amongst 3 people. He loses the first board, but then he's actually going to win the second board, and that's going to give him a net win of about half of whatever the largest stack is. That's how running it more than once multi-way, turns out. So if you hadn't seen that, you'd be like, okay, Mike's just a gambler. By the way, this is why I wanted to do this, because I wanted to actually juxtapose hands that were similar next to each other. So take a look at a couple of preflop hands here. So we've got this guy opening to 40, 8-4 offsuit calls in between, and whoop, this guy's picked up aces here from the cutoff, and he's going to 3-bet here to 120. The stack sizes are actually accurate in this hand, and oh boy, Mike Postle here in the small blinds got kings, and this is a big cooler as they will stay here on stones. This is just something that, will happen sometimes in poker. So raise, call, 3-bet. Harlan, by the way, calls in between. So it's a very, very easy 4-bet for Mike, which he does. He 4-bets to 450. This guy gets out of the way, the initial raiser. This guy actually probably does have 8-4. I played with him a bunch. He makes the call, and that, of course, just makes it a very, very easy 5-bet for aces, as opposed to, say, like, if they had both fold and he wanted to play it, say, tricky. So he does re-raise to 1,800, which is kind of ridiculous sizing because it commits himself. And Mike's, going to go in the tank. Now, I can tell you as a professional poker player, I don't know if I've ever folded king in a cash game, actually. But it's pretty amazing when you look back to back that you've got a guy who will call off correctly with 4-5 offsuit in a situation versus 2 ace kings, and then correctly fold king when the other person has ace ace. So now we're going to move on to some bluff hands, and I have to shout out here to Jeff Boski, who I actually took this particular hand from when he was cutting best of hands. We've all seen, if anybody's familiar, a ton of Postle bluff hands. So I'm only going to go through a couple, and there's one towards the end here too. But if you want to take a look at the link in the description and see more bluff hands, I'll put a link in there. He was unbelievably bluff heavy pretty much all the time. And it was crazy how much he bluffed. And we'll talk about why I have a problem with that too, because we never really saw him bluff into a weak range ever. So in this particular hand, we've got something that's kind of crazy going on here. Rich limps in here from up front. Postle raises from the cutoff to 60, and Rich limp re-raises to 180. So we've got a limp, a raise to 60, a limp re-raise to 180, and Postle makes the call. And we sort of come in on this on the flop, and Rich leads here as a continuation bet for 200, and Postle calls here with a wheel draw, ace-3 of clubs, and an overcard, which at this point, nothing's really gone sort of crazy with these stack sizes here. Maybe you would fold ace-3 of clubs to somebody that you think might always have aces or kings or something like that. But I think the flop play here for Postle is pretty standard. So the turn here, though, is the 4 of spades, and this is really where it gets non-standard. And now Rich is basically going to check and make it look like he's going to give up. Okay, it's on Postle. Not a bad spot here to bet. You actually want to have ace-king fold here. So, you look like you're calling with something. This is one of your worst draws, so he's going to bet out. I've got no problem with it whatsoever. He's going to bet 365. This is really where it gets off the rails, though. Rich is going to check raise the turn here. So he limp re-raised on the pre-flop, bet the flop, and he's now check raised the turn here. Postle's turn bet. He made it $830, and you would think that Mike would just basically fold, right? No, Mike doesn't fold. He's going to call. I want you to pay attention to the pot size and how much Rich has left. So the pot's 2,500. Rich has about 2,500 left. We're dealing with one pot size bet left. The river here is an offsuit 6, and Rich continues. He bets 1,000 in a 2,500. So limp re-raise, bet flop, check raise turn, continues here for 1,000. Pot is 3,500. He only has like 1,500 left. I mean, you would think Postle would have folded on the turn, and now he's got to fold on the river. But amazingly, he is going to move all in here with ace-3, even though the pot's approaching $6,000, and Rich, it's only 1,500 for Rich to call, so he would literally not fold any pair here whatsoever. So what's crazy about this is that and Rich makes this call, and actually Postle loses, and this is one of the few times when you'll actually see Postle lose, which is basically bluffing into a weak range. And as I'll continue to point out, if you see a player make these types of bluffs, and like I said, I have a list of them, there has to be another side to this where he is bluffing into strong ranges, he's bluffing into the nuts, things like that. All right, the other bluff hand that we're going to take a look at here is Queen Jacks and Queen Jacks. And what I have to say here too is, like I said, I went in here and looked at all the details of the stacks. Frank the Tank actually has the same stack as Lone Ranger here. So we're dealing with 3,500 both. And what ends up happening is this hand has a $50 straddle in it, and Mike is the straddle. So it gets limped around 5 ways. Mike checks his straddle. This guy bets out of the big blind. Harlan checks. This guy bets, even though it says Mike bet 50. So he bets. Lone Stranger bets with top pair. Mike calls with 9 of clubs, 4 of hearts. And then it's going to get around here to Frank the Tank, who again starts with 3,500, not 1,500. And he's going to raise. He's going to raise it up to 140. This is a limped pot. You can see they both have the same hand. Lone Ranger's going to make the call. And Mike's like, I call too. So now we're getting into this big pot here. 2 Queen Jacks against 9-4 offsuit, right? Turn card here is the 10 of spades. So it brings in like King, Queen, 7-8, things like that. It's going to get checked over to Frank the Tank here once again. And he's going to continue. Remember, he raised the flop. And now he's going to continue. He's going to bet 300 here into 680. Lone Ranger is going to make another quick call. So bet 300 call, and at this point, you would think, oh my God, I'm done with 9-4. I mean, I would have been done with it on the flop. But Mike's going to make this call here. So he makes the call here again. So now the pot's 1,600. And the river rolls off the 10 of diamonds, which brings in the front door flush. And remember, Frank the Tank actually has 2,500 to 3,000 left. So Lone Ranger's going to check, and Mike just explicitly blasts all in here. Like he was waiting for a scare card here. He just moves it all in for 2,500 to 3,000 into both these guys on the river. And obviously, it's very, very difficult for them to call here, even with top pair. By the way, these are not the types of guys that you necessarily want to bluff off of hands. But, when the front door diamond comes in, Frank can't call. And then Lone Ranger finally folds as well. And it's almost like Mike could see the cards. All right, let's move on from the bluffing hands, although there will be a few left over, and let's move to this category of what I like to call just call. And this one's pretty amazing. So we get a situation where Harlan raises it up here to 55 from +2. Faraz calls on the button, and Postle only calls in the small blind with ace queen of diamonds. Faraz, pretty good flop, flops the nut straight, also has a diamond draw. Check, Harlan checks, Faraz checks. So it gets checked around on the flop. The turn is the 7 of diamonds. Now remember, this is only a single raise pot, and what you have to remember is the flop action as well when we take a look at this. It got checked around on the flop. So Mike is going to come out and bet with the nut flush, ace queen of diamonds on this basically paired board. He comes out and he bets. Harlan's going to finally think about it, and he's going to fold. And then Faraz is going to continue to basically slow play, and he just calls. He has a straight flush now. He cannot lose the hand here. This is not a common thing in Hold'em to be able to have a 2-card straight flush. So he makes the call. The stack sizes are accurate, by the way. He only has 550. The river now is an offsuit 8, and this is really, really incredible. Mike now checks the river. Remember, it was a single raise pot, and it got checked around the flop. And the reason why I keep harping on that is because it is almost impossible for this guy to have a full house, or for you to be scared of a full house here, because there was no bet on the flop. Hands like 9-7, pocket 9s, pocket 7s. Anytime somebody sees like a board like this, a lot of times, especially if they're recreational players, they're going to bet for protection. So if I had ace queen of diamonds here, I'm not scared of anything. Plus, there's also a one-liner out here to a straight, so I very well might get paid off by a straight. Mike checks here, and it's like, okay, maybe he's getting tricky. He's going to go for a check raise. The guy bets 140 into 430, and he only has 410 left. 140 into 430, and he only has 410 left. That's all he has. If any other person checked the river here, you would check jam 100 out of 100 times with the ace-high flush for the reasons that I just stated. There are very few full houses that end up here at the end because of the flop action. I mean, this is unbelievable. He just calls and leaves the guy 400, or he leaves the guy, with his stack, whatever it was, $410, and loses basically the minimum with the ace high flush versus a straight flush. All right, the next just call hand, and I want to point something out to you because there was a discussion, or at least Justin Kuritis had claimed that this hand was a misread. And normally a misread happens, I would say 99% of the time, when the cards, say from like seat 1, get pitched over into seat 2 and it's red in seat 1, and then seat 2's cards basically malfunction, or for whatever reason the previous hand doesn't get reset. So Mike over here is in seat 6. You can see this guy pitch the card here, there, and that's the first card, and now he's going to pitch the second card. So there's nothing around him, and I just want to point that out here basically in this hand. So we'll get into the hand here, and he's going to open here from +2 with 8-8, and Brian, who we're going to see later on as well, just flat calls here with 10s, brings this guy in here in the straddle. 3 ways, board comes out 9-9-4. Mike is going to make a bet here at 55. Brian calls. Brian's going to fill up on the turn, and the other guy folds. And Mike is going to now bet again here on the turn. One thing, too, that was mentioned about this hand is that, well, if Mike, knows that Brian has pocket 10s, why is he betting? And one of the things I'll point out here is just that it looks like he's texting on his phone or doing something on his phone. And I've seen this in other places too, where, it could be possible that he doesn't really, look down if he does have information until maybe the river or something like that, until there's a big decision. I just found it interesting that he's clearly doing something on his phone here, where if he was using something that would give him privy to the cards, maybe he doesn't have that, up at the time. So he bets again here on the turn into, $210, and Brian calls again. So Brian here with 10s full, and the river comes in 8, which is an absolute disaster here for Mike. So it's full house over full house. The pot is $370. The stack sizes are correct, by the way, once again here. I mean, Mike's got about 885, and Brian's got, well, Brian actually has more than Mike, so it's pretty close. Stack sizes are pretty close. Mike checks the river, and similar to the last hand here, like that we saw versus the ace high flush versus the straight flush, if you were going to check the river because you thought the guy had a 9 and he was going to bet anyways, then the play here is to check jam. Brian bets 200 into 370. He only has 595 left. So again, 100 out of 100 people are going to check raise this river all in if you check the river. But Mike just calls. He just calls and check calls with 8s full against 10s full, and once again loses the minimum. All right, I'm fairly certain that this hand has never been seen, or it hasn't been brought out on any of the streams, the Joey Ingram stream, Boski. I just remember seeing this when I was using it for my own hands on Crush Live Poker. So in this particular hand here, we've got Harlan with a $10 big blind or straddle. He limps in. Vic raises it up here with pocket 7s from the hijack, and Mike 3-bets to 160 from the cutoff. And Harlan here limp calls from +3. So he limps in and he cold calls the 3-bet. Vic also calls. So 10, 45, 160, call. And we're going to go 3 ways here to the flop. And the stack sizes are correct. Postle is deep with Harlan at about 3,300. Board comes out queen, deuce, 8 rainbow. Great flop for Mike here with aces. Pot's 500. He's going to obviously want to start building a pot up here against Harlan. So he's going to bet. And Harlan's going to call here, which was not uncommon. I mean, these two really like to battle. He bets 215. Harlan's going to make the call with a deuce, and Vic gets out of the way. Now, this is really where we start to see some of the incredible stuff. The turn is a 3, and I have to pause it because it's so quick you might miss it. So Harlan makes 2 pair, deuces and 3s. And he checks, and Mike instantly checks it back without a second thought. Let me play that in real time here again. I'll just skip it back to what it looks like here when the 3 comes. So queen deuce 3, turns a 3, Harlan checks, and we're already at the river now. Check, check. River's a 3. So Harlan now makes 3s full of deuces. Why on earth you would ever check a 3 on the turn is really beyond me, especially against the guy that's going to pay off with queen X. The only reason to maybe even think about doing that is that somehow, if you thought that, like, well, if I check it back, he's going to bluff 9-10 or jack 10, but usually you want to go for value. And now Harlan comes out and bets, and Mike actually got let off the hook here a little bit on this one. At first it said 400, but Harlan actually bet 700 here at the end. So a gigantic bet, 700 into 930, because if Harlan had bet any smaller, like 200, I think Mike almost has to raise here. It's going to raise suspicion, unless he's going to lie about his hand, and we'll talk about that later on, because that was commonly done. But he bet 700 here at the end, and, you know, Mike's going to put on this big show. But I mean, he instantly checked back the turn. What's the show here? I mean, there is no option but raise or call. Maybe at this sizing, it's just call. But how does he know he's beat? He's kind of throwing his hands up like he knows he's beat. And he makes the call. And, you know, the other thing, too, about this that I've started seeing on Twitter from Justin Curitis as well, if Mike can see the cards, why doesn't he just fold? Why doesn't he just fold aces? Why didn't he just check fold 8s full? Why didn't he just check fold the ace high flush? I mean, he can't, I don't think that he did this well, but he can't make it so obvious that everyone would know. All right, we're going to move on to a new bucket, and I like to call this same hand. You can call it bluffing off of a chop. It's really incredible. The first one that we're going to look at here, I'm not sure if this has come out. I might have found it on a Joey stream. I'm not 100% sure, but 3 hands that are sort of similar to this. So this one starts off here with a $25 straddle or $25 blind, and it's going to get limped around to Postle, who makes it 150 on the button with queen, and he does have 2,500. And this guy here, Jason B., who's in the straddle for 25, has a couple people who call in between, and he also has queen, and he is going to 3-bet queen here, and it's going to get around to Postle, and he's going to call. So a 3-bet to 425. Postle calls. This guy, Magic Mike, he also, or Mortgage Mike, excuse me, he also calls in the big blind. So it's a 3-way pot, 3-bet pot. Jason and Postle both have the same hand, and you can see there's 1,300 in the pot. So it comes out 8-7-7 with 2 clubs. Jason here with the queen of clubs, he's going to come out and he's going to make a continuation bet here. And again, the stacks are accurate in this particular hand. So he comes out and he bets. Postle is going to end up thinking about it for a little bit, and he's going to make the call. So Postle makes the call, and then this other guy behind is going to fold. So bet and a call. You can see now the pot is 2,400. So they have just under a pot size bet left. The turn's the jack of diamonds, and Jason B is going to check, and Mike here is going to check behind, as you can see here. Now, this in itself is not necessarily anything that's strange in a 3-bet pot. You will see some people check behind for pot control. Sometimes people will bet for protection with queens. So it's not that odd that Mike has checked behind here with an overpair. It's actually not that odd that Jason has checked here on the turn. But what really comes here on the river is odd. The river's the 9 of diamonds. So it runs out a backdoor diamond draw with a one-liner to a 10. Now, usually what you'll see here is if somebody checks on the river from up front, like Jason, sort of haphazardly, almost like he's not interested in the pot, and he was the 3-better pre-flop, there's going to be a lot of ace-king in his range. And if we've got queen, we obviously beat ace-king. So there's really no reason to turn queen here into a bluff against ace-king because you beat ace-king. And if the river was like an offsuit deuce, like a deuce of spades, you could make a case that when Postle checked back on the turn, he could make a very small value bet on the river to try to get called by ace high, actually try to get called by ace king, like make it look like he busted out on clubs. But with his specific hand here, which is queen, he moves all in on the river. So he moves all in here at the end, which just doesn't really make any sense. Like I said, to an expert like me with this specific his hand is too in between. If he had nothing, that might make sense. If he had like busted clubs to make this bluff. But specifically with queen, the only real thing that you're doing here is trying to bluff off ace ace or king king, and a lot of times this guy's not going to have that. And it's just so convenient that the guy ends up having the same hand. Now you might say, hey Bart, well, why did he not bet the turn? Well, if he can see the cards and you actually think about the best strategy and the way to play this, you wouldn't want to bet the turn because the guy's basically just going to get it all in with you. What you would want to do is check back the turn. You'd want to wait and see if a scare card can come, like this card, the 6 of clubs, the 9 of clubs, the 9 of diamonds, a 10, any card that actually might scare him away and get him to fold the same hand, which is exactly what has happened here, and the guy ends up folding. All right, next hand here. I've just put this in the front here. Mike limps in. I want to point that out. It's kind of interesting here. Mike is going to limp in here, and it's going to get folded around here to Aaron in seat 5, and he's going to raise it up here to 135. In this particular hand, it was 20 in the big blind, so a limp 135. Paul just calls in the small blind. You can see that Mike and Paul are both very deep. He just calls in the small blind with ace-king, and Mike limp calls also with ace-king. So it's 3 ways here. The pot's blown up. King, deuce, 5. So a couple of hearts out there. Both players have ace-king. Gets checked over to Aaron in seat 5, and Aaron's going to make a continuation bet here of 275. Now, Paul here in the small blind immediately check raises. So he check raises it up to 600, and now Mike calls. So bet, check raise. Mike makes the call. Obviously, Aaron, who's the preflop raiser now, is going to fold, and this is really where we get interesting here. You can see the pot is $1,900, and they're deep, 8,000 behind. Turn here is the jack of diamonds, and Paul now is actually going to check it over to Mike. So he check raises, Mike cold calls, which is a very strong play to cold call a check raise, and now Mike is going to bet when check to with ace king. Okay, it's not insane, not crazy. He's going to bet, and he bets 550, and Paul makes the call. So we've got this gigantic pot that we're playing basically with one pair. Remember, neither player is actually the pre-flop raiser. The river is a 6, an offsuit 6. So it's king, deuce, 5, jack, 6. They both have the same hand. Paul now checks, and Mike now rips it in, all in. He rips it all in for an effective bet of 7,500 into 3,000 with ace king as a single pair. The reason why some of this stuff doesn't really make a whole lot of sense is because if you thought that Paul had a hand like king queen specifically, you wouldn't want to blow him off of that hand. So it's almost like Mike's hand here is too, again, in between to make this bet size. You never want to get into a situation in no limit where you're getting everything weaker than your hand to fold and only better to call. But there is, I guess, option B where you get the same hand to fold because maybe you know what it is all the time. All right, next same hand. Hey, there's Veronica. There is the whistleblower. She's the one that brought this out and got Joey to investigate it. So in this hand, I'm going to do a setup here. $20, limped around several ways. Mike here raises out of the small blind to 150, and he's going to get a couple of callers. This guy, Anthony, in the hijack's going to call with jack, deuce of hearts. Ben in the cutoff, who's a player we're going to look at, calls. And then Dave C calls. So 150 times 4, it's 600. The board comes out ace 7-5. Now remember, these guys have limped in and Mike has raised. So it's ace 7-5. Mike is going to bet 275. Anthony now folds. And Ben, who had just initially limped and then called the raise, he's going to call. So he calls the 275 here because we're going to start thinking about what's a limp calling range. The turn here is a 7. Brings the 7 of diamonds out here. And now, traditionally, this is actually not going to be a great card for the pre-flop raiser. Something that sometimes you'll have to take concern of, especially if you have top pair, which means that there's less combinations of top pair. It's possible someone might have called here with the 7. Mike's going to continue to drive forward, though, and he's going to bet 550. So he bets the flop as a C bet. Now he's going to bet the turn, 550. And Ben knows, Postle's like crazy style. So Ben continues to defend here with ace 10. So it's 2.3K to the river. The river's a 3. That also brings in 4-6, by the way, which is a straight. And once again here, Ben having just under 6,000, we are going to get a bizarre bet here by Mike Postle. He bets 5,000 on the river. So once again, he's going to 2x the size of the pot here. And the reason why this is so bizarre is, again, his hand is too in between here, in the sense that Ben, and I know Ben actually, Ben is pretty much not going to have ace jack, ace queen, ace king, because that would have been raised off pre-flop. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get value from a weak ace, like ace deuce, ace four, ace six, ace eight, something like that, that's, limped in and then called. You're trying to get value from those hands. You also wouldn't want to put your stack at risk against possibly Ben having a 7 here, which is definitely possible, or 4-6, or slow playing like pocket fives. The only time a bet like this would make any sense is if you specifically knew that Ben actually had the same hand and you wanted him to fold, because you don't want him to fold ace 9. You don't want him to fold ace 8. You beat those hands. So what's the point of the bet? All right, this is another crazy bluff hand, but I put it here for a reason, because it's going to basically flow into what I think is one of the most important hands next hand, and I want to bring up basically a point. So most people have seen this hand. Basically, it's juiced up pre-flop, Veronica 3-bet, Mike's open, bunch of people called, and it was already 1,200, and then it got checked around on the flop. So queen, queen, 4 checked around. Turns a 5. And what you're going to see is some Jeff Boski sort of icons in this hand. So Scott here is going to bet out with nothing. He's going to bet 430, and you can see that little phone icon indicates what Boski's saying is that Mike is looking down right at his crotch, which is the whole, basically hypothesis about how he would see the cards, is that, he either had the live feed or the graphic GFX program. So Scott bets out. Mike raises to 1,200 with a wheel draw with ace deuce offsuit. Scott 3-bets the turn. Both of these guys have absolutely nothing. Bet 430 up to 1,200. Scott 3-bets to 3,000. Postle re-raises as a 4-bet on the turn to 5,000 with just pure air. I mean, this is the type of shit that you don't see. By the way, you see up here, that's Justin Curitis. He loves it. Justin Curitis, he loves it. And then, of course, Scott here has to fold. And that's the point right there that I want to bring up, is that he claims that he has ace-queen, which I think is very interesting as we lead into the next hand. So I actually think that this is really one of the most damning hands that was on Stones, and this is one where I'm going to go into analysis. And it starts, really, the most important thing is with pre-flop here. And the pre-flop action is that this guy limps in, Postle completes the small blind, and Brian raises. And that's very, very important. The guy behind calls, and Postle also just calls. And why that's so important is because if Postle has pocket aces, pocket kings, or ace-king here, he's either going to first straight raise into Brian, or if he's trying to play some sort of trap, like a limp re-raise, he's certainly going to limp re-raise when this guy calls, as opposed to just calling heads up. That's extremely important when we take a look at this board. Remember, Brian here is the pre-flop raiser, so we know that Mike doesn't have aces, kings, or ace-king, basically always. So Brian's going to c-bet. This guy gets out of the way, and Postle's going to sort of go into bluff catching mode with the 6. Okay, he's going to take one off. You can see that the turn here is the ace of hearts. That's a great barrel card for Brian. His range also, and his hand as he picks up backdoor hearts. So it's a great double barrel by him. He's going to bet again, and Postle kind of looking down here at his phone, kind of going into bluff catch mode once again. He doesn't believe him, so he's going to call again. And here's where we get to what I think is incredible about this hand. The river here is an ace. Now, if Postle was going to be consistent with his whole bluff catching action, he would check, let Brian bet, and just call. But this is actually where he gets greedy, in my view. If he knows what the cards are, he's actually going to throw out a little block bet here. And the purpose of this bet, specifically with his hand, is to actually induce a raise, because he recognizes a situation here that this very well might hit Brian's range. And if Brian doesn't know what Postle has, Brian can easily represent ace king, pocket kings, whatever, a very, very strong hand because of the pre-flop raise. And he gets it. He gets what he's looking for. He induces a raise. So Brian's going to raise, and something very, very strange happens now, because when I was looking at this and then I sort of put it all together, the play here obviously is the call. Like I said, you would never bet as a block to try to get raised with such a weak hand like a 6. The play here is to call, but Postle had, I think, realized here at this particular time that calling this hand and showing it down with 9-6 would be so egregious that it would create suspicion. Now, I don't know if he had thought that through when he blocked at the end on the river, but he figured it out now. So the only option for him is to move all in so that the cards don't get shown. He knows Brian has 8-9. Brian can't call. You can see the disgust in Brian's face. Brian's going to end up folding. So the cards never get shown. And when asked about the hand later on, Postle can just say, oh, it was a hand reader. It was a hand misreader. I had, say, pocket 6s. The funny thing about pocket 6s here is that 6s wouldn't even take this line. If you bet the river with 6s as a full house and then got raised by the preflop raiser, you're not going to bet 3-bet all in. The preflop raiser is going to have a fair amount of ace, king, kings, one combo of pocket aces. Pretty much you're always going to bet and call. You're not going to move all in. If we don't even see the cards, this hand makes absolutely no sense because it all goes back to preflop. And like I said, this is a little bit of greed here for Postle. And then sort of, I think what happened was an audible, realizing that he can't show down the fact that he bet calls with 9-6. So he just gets the cards to be non-shown down. All right, so these hands have definitely not been seen. And the reason why I saw them was because I was looking back at a session that I had played. So these are 2 hands against a particular player. So in this particular hand, and this is one of the more egregious ones too, if you know about poker, I opened to 16 from +1. Postle's going to 3-bet here to 76 from +3 with Jack 7 offsuit. We're going to get a cold call here from David M on the button. It gets back around to me, and I also call. So we're 3 ways here to the flop. 233, Postle the 3-better with Jack 7 offsuit. Check, Postle's going to bet. David M is going to call here with his top pair, Jack 9, and of course I'm going to get out of the way. And we are going to go to the turn. So we go to the turn, and the turn's the 10 of hearts. So Postle now picks up a heart draw and a gut shot here to an 8. It's not an unreasonable barrel from him with a semi-bluff. He's going to come out and bet pretty large. But David, knowing Postle's sort of MO, he doesn't believe him, and he calls down. And now this is really where it gets super, super interesting. With the pot being 1,000, the river runs out of 4 flush, gives David M trips, and gives Postle a jack high flush. And without a second thought, I didn't even edit this that much, Postle puts out a $500 bet. Look at the board here. He's the 3-better. He gets called on the flop, called on the turn, and now he ends up with he loses to the queen, the king, and the ace, the 4th nut flush. He's got the 4th nut flush here. Now, in anybody's world that understands poker, this is not a value bet here, especially when the board pairs for 500. But, David M happens to have trip 9s, so he puts it out without a second thought, and he just thinks that he knows it's absolutely good. All right, another hand that no one has seen, and this is, again, an example probably of a hand here where you wouldn't think of it too much unless you had seen all these other hands sort of in a row. Here, Postle raises to 40, same night, same guy calls on the button here, Jack 10 offsuit, and now they're heads up. The pot's $96. Ace Jack 8 with a couple of clubs. Okay, it's not usually the type of spot that you're going to fire multiple barrels at. Postle is going to make a continuation bet here with 9s with the 9 of clubs, and David M here is going to call. I mean, you could make a case that you're betting your whole range here, on the flop or something like that, but Dave M's going to call. So now the pot's $216. Turn is a 6, and now you probably start to lose out on some value here with 9s, but Postle's going to continue to bet again, and David M is continuing to be a non-believer, and he's going to continue to call. So now the pot is $576. River rolls off the king of hearts. So it's 576, ace 8 jack, 6 king, and Postle decides to move all in for a pot size bet. And again, when you look at this, you just look at the composition of the hand. 9s is not going to be a hand that you are usually going to be triple barreling across this particular board, it would make sense if you knew your opponent had a jack and you wanted to bluff him off of specifically a jack, but he's not going to fold an ace. You also have to be concerned about backdoor hearts and also the possibility that someone actually might have run into king jack. So unless you specifically think that, you're going to get him off a queen jack or jack 10 or maybe jack 9, but you hold 2 of the 9s, it's almost too perfect. Okay, a big call. I first saw this hand when Joey Ingram and Doug Polk went over it, and you got to keep in mind here that this is the same night that we're going to go over a hand at the end of this video from the same night, the Queen 10 of Diamonds hand. So basically what happens here is we get a raise here out of seat 4 to 75. VX calls with ace queen. Magic Man just calls with ace king. It's going to bring in these people in the blind, one of which is Postle. This guy's in there straddle with 10-5 offsuit. So already the pot's 450, and we're going 5 ways. Gets checked over the preflop raiser. He checks. Gets checked over to the button. For some reason, now the button's going to bet, even though he didn't 3-bet off preflop, just with 2 overcards. He bets 125. AC's going to call here with an open-ended straight draw with deuce 5. Mike has top pair, 8-4 of hearts. He's going to make the call. Jackass J is also going to call. Remember this guy, too, for the last hand that we go over. And VX also calls. So basically everybody calls, and now it's 1100 to the turn. Turns the 9 of clubs. Postle's hand pretty much turns into dust. Gets checked over now to this guy in the middle who checked after the preflop raiser had checked and just basically was the last caller on the flop. And he's going to stab at it here for a big bet with ace queen with the ace of clubs. And obviously ace king here is going to fold. AC folds. One of the things here for Postle is he doesn't have a club in his hand. He also has to worry about Jackass J behind him too. He has another player behind him. He can't really improve either. I mean, everyone's basically going to be folding this hand, but he makes the call. Jackass J folds, and now the pot's $1,800, and we move to the river, and the river is another overcard here to an 8. It's the Jack of Diamonds. $2,600 in the pot. Postle's going to check. VX here is not going to think about it too long, and he is just going to move all in here for basically 2,000. So it's about a pot-sized bet. And, Postle thinking, oop, touch his hat, look down at his crotch, thinks. This was probably about maybe a minute or 2 in real time. Oh my God, I've got an 8 here, but I'm going to make a huge hero call. And of course, he ends up making the right play, and he makes the call. And he knows that it's good. So this is why I wanted to do this in order to sort of juxtapose these hands. So we saw, this is from a different night, but we saw Postle just, make that huge call down. And now we're going to get into a hand here where he raises to 55 with ace king of diamonds, gets called here in multiple spots, cut off button, this guy in the big blind. And we'll watch this guy in the big blind stack here too, because it's going to come into play. So the pot's $290, and Postle's in trouble here because he's got ace king, and this guy, who's not that deep, has flopped a set of 8s. So it's going to get checked over here to Mike with the pot being 290. Mike's going to put in, he's going to touch his hat a little bit, but he's going to put in a bet of 160. AC is going to call here with a flush draw next to act, and now it will get folded back around here to this guy, Sub here in the big blind, and Sub is going to shove all in here for 825. So he's going to move in for 825. That means that the pot here is 1400. Harlan's going to get out of the way. It's 1400, and it's 665 here for Mike P to call. He's getting over 2.5 to 1. Now, yes, AC did call behind him, but is this consistent with this type of guy that is going to call 2,000 at the end there with 8-4 of hearts from that previous night? And here he's going to fold ace king to a $665 all in. He's going to think about it, getting over 2.5 to 1, and he just happens to let it go, and he makes the right decision once again. Okay, this is another really quick hand here that's actually been brought out, but I think it's very interesting to go along this topic here. Mike's in the straddle. Robert here from +2 raises it up to 26 with pocket 9s. Everybody else is folded, and Mike is called, and they're going to go heads up. So the pot's $58. And the board comes out 9 deuce 3 with a couple clubs. So, that's a pretty good flop here for Robert. Flop's top set. And Mike's going to check his cards. He's going to check, and Robert's going to put in a tiny, tiny bet here of $25. And Mike makes a quick call. Now he's got 2 overcards here, 3 to a straight. He's got the jack of clubs in his hand. You actually might defend to a bet like that. Now the turn's a jack, so Mike obviously improves here. He's going to check, and Robert's going to bet 50 now with a set of 9. So this is a really bad card here for Mike because, obviously it's going to lose him money. He's going to get involved, right? No, he just folds. So he peels on the flop with 2 overcards and backdoors, and now he hits his top pair and folds. And again, the logic being here is that he either wasn't aware of what the hand was on the flop, or the second option is that Robert had such a big hand here and Mike had backdoors that Mike could have won big money if he had turned his backdoor draw and then made his backdoor draw at the end. But the jack does not help his backdoor draw, so he simply folds. And this is just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Okay, this hand is really something, and no one really has seen it. It was buried at the end of a Joey stream when I texted Joey and told him to look at it, but not many people have seen this, and this is really, really something if you understand poker. So Mike's got aces. He's going to raise it up here to 40 from the button, and Derek here is going to get a little frisky, and he's going to 3-bet here to 150 with king deuce of diamonds. Mike now is going to 4-bet extremely small to 350, and Derek is going to call, probably because the 4-bet sizing was so small. So this is a 4-bet pot. You can see the stack sizes are correct. The pot's $715. Mike's got aces with the ace of diamonds. Board comes out, 9-5-6 rainbow. Derek here is going to check. Mike's going to think about it for a while, and he decides to check it back. That in itself is not necessarily egregious on this type of board. Maybe sometimes bet, maybe sometimes check, but he checks it back. Turn here is the 9 of diamonds. So Derek now picks up the king high diamond draw with king deuce of diamonds. Pot $715. He's going to come out and bet on his semi bluff. And Mike here is going to think about it for a little bit. It's a pretty big bet, 525. And Mike is eventually going to make the call. And that's going to make the pot right around $1,700 or $1,800. And now we roll to the river, and the river's the 5 of diamonds. So 9-6-5-9-5. So Derek has made backdoor diamonds. He's made his king high flush. Yes, the board is double paired, but he obviously is going to come out and bet because, it's a 4-bet pot. Neither player really should have a 9 or a 5 from Mike or Derek's perspective here, by the way. So Derek's going to cut out chips, and he's going to make a pretty hefty bet here. And here's the thing when I was saying for people that understand poker, Mike has aces with the ace of diamonds in his hand. So if you were to ever choose a combination of aces that is absolutely a call, first of all, when you play aces in this manner in a 4-bet pot, you're going to call down here. I mean, you feigned weakness the entire time, right? And the board gets double paired of rags. But if you're concerned that somebody makes the backdoor flush, the fact that you have the ace of diamonds is huge here, right? I mean, this isn't a hand that you could possibly fold, especially with the ace of diamonds. But Mike hems and haws, thinks about, oh my God, it's a 4-bet pot. This guy bet on the turn and on the river after I checked back 9-5-6. I'm going to fold my hand, and I'm correct once again. Like I said, this hand hasn't been seen by many. It's one of the worst ones. All right, so in this hand that some people have probably seen, I'm actually going to pump the commentator volume up towards the end of the hand because this is their pure reaction to what happens in this hand. I mean, the scandal hasn't really come out yet. So this is a situation here where Mike raised here with ace-queen, and this guy, the lawyer, called here with 10-7 of clubs. And Mike is going to check here. He's not going to put in the c-bet. He's got the best hand. The lawyer's going to bet, and Mike's going to call. So check, bet, call. Okay. Turn is an 8. Mike still has the best hand here with ace high. He is going to check here again, and the lawyer is going to continue to bluff here with 10 high. So lawyer bets again here, and Mike thinks about it for a while, and he calls once again. And we're going to go to the river here, and I'm going to pipe the
You're going to go back
volume
and
up
watch the stream
here
because you want to
a
know
little
what the
bit
lawyer had
at the
every
end.
single hand that you were in with him.
So the river's going to roll off
But good luck tonight. There
a
should be some
7.
fun stuff.
So Mike
And the lawyer gets
gets
there on the river.
rivered.
God, so sick.
Mike looks tilted. Before, I mean, I didn't even see if the lawyer had done anything yet, and Mike, it looked like he already said, "Oh my God," like as if he hated that card.
That's Casey's natural
So
reaction.
weird, especially on that board texture. Like, how does the 7 ever really hurt you? But I guess it sure does if you're against the lawyer here. This is so.
I mean, it
sick.
hurts you if the guy's got 5-6, but you would
Oh
think
my
he would check
God.
back a 7.
Oh my
So
God.
instead, Mike, knowing that he had the best hand the whole way, and he's really pissed that this guy hits the river, he decides to turn his hand into a bluff.
What?
Whoa!
Oh my God.
No.
So he turns his hand into a bluff instead of calling down, and the lawyer folds. Now, the reason why I put that hand in is because it leads into our last hand where we're going to look at some Mike reactions, and this is a hand that no one's gone over here before because the graphics were a jumbled mess. And I fixed them, and I'll show you what I did. Basically, I screen capped a earlier street, and I'll tell you why they were a mess. I'm going to sort of pause it right here. Basically, what ends up happening, this is also important here too. This is why it's so hard to sometimes follow these streams and why some of these hands haven't come out. This guy raises to 60. This guy had put the double straddle on what looked like to either, I believe it was 40. So it was 5, 10, 20. This guy made it 40. He raised to 60, and this guy is like, is that a legal raise? That's what they're trying to figure out. Is that a legal raise? Is that a legal raise? Can I make it 60? But they said, okay, he can make it 60. So he's the pre-flop raiser to 60. Postle calls, this guy calls, and Robert Y here is going to put down the hammer, and he's going to 3-bet. There's a lot of dead money out there. You can see Jack 10 of spades, Queen 10 of diamonds. So he makes it 405. The original raiser with 7-6 of diamonds is going to make the call. Postle's going to come in the hand. Jackass J is also going to come in the hand, and we're going to see this multi-way pot, and it's really, really large here. It's going to be 1,700. So we're 1,700 in a 3-bet pot, 4 ways. You got to love live poker, right? And the flop comes, and it's going to miss everyone. So it's 8-6 with a couple of spades. I mean, Jackass J has a flush draw, but he doesn't bet. He checks it over to Robert Y, who's the preflop 3-better, and it gets checked through. This guy checks behind here with a 6. So it gets checked through. Pot's still 1,700. Turns a 10. So now Postle has the best hand, and he's going to come out and he's going to bet. Now, whether or not, certainly some people might come out and bet here with Queen 10. There isn't anything that's really, crazy about that. But he's got the best hand. Obviously, Jackass J to his immediate left with Jack 10 of spades is going to make the call. Robert Y here is going to get out of the way. And Jason, I don't know what Jason's doing because he really needs to fold here with 7-6 of diamonds. He's the preflop raiser, but he comes in and he also calls. I mean, he's got a gut shot here to a 9, but again, I'll harp back on when you're looking at hand reading, he's the preflop raiser with what's going to come here on the river. So now the pot's 3,600. Let's take a look here at Mike. The river's a 6. Mike gets bleeded off. Mike gets upset, and I want to scroll it back here. So this is where the graphics start to go nuts because someone accidentally folded Jackass J's hand out. So the graphics go haywire here, where they fold out his hand, and when the 6 comes at the end, that's the correct graphics. This is what I screen capped, right? So this is the correct graphics, but what you see on the actual live feed ends up being this.
Happened to Postle.
So it looks really, really weird, and we're trying to figure out what the hell's going on, and then these things come up, all this shit comes up, these little pop-ups and stuff like that. So what I did was I fixed the graphics, and I took the pop-ups out so that we can actually see kind of what's going on. So I screen cap this part here, and now I'm going to transpose it over the river right now, and this is what we've got with the board. So the river's a 6. That really shouldn't affect anything here, right? Now, if I was Mike, I would probably check with the intention of check calling. He checks, Jackass J checks, and now the preflop raiser, who has made trips at the end, he's going to move all in for 1,200 into 3,600. So the pot's going to be 4,800, 1,200 for Mike to call, right? And oh my God, Mike is He can't believe it. How can this guy? But what does the 6 do at the end? This is the guy that called from the same night with the 8-4 hand. He called that other guy with 8-4. How on earth do you fold here for 1,200? I mean, yeah, he's got this guy behind him, but remember, that guy was playing 10-5 from before. How do you, I can't imagine folding here in this spot. But he somehow finds the fold. And now it's back over to Jackass J. And again, Jackass J's got a 10 here. Now, maybe he was not going to overcall again, if Mike called, but he calls because that's sort of the normal play. I mean, this guy's the preflop raiser. How does the 6 improve his hand? By the way, too, on the turn was so bloated. No one's going to be slow playing anything here. The pot was 3,600 on the turn. Somehow the guy turned Jack 9. If he took a card with 7-9, he's going to be putting it in with 2 front door spades out there. He's not going to be just overcalling on the turn. So there's no slow plays on the turn. So this is usually a bluff. Unless the guy somehow has a 6, which is pretty rare when a guy opens and then calls a gigantic 3-bet. So any type of poker player here is going to call here with the 10. So once again, if you understand poker, you realize how egregious this play is, especially after you saw Mike call in that impossible spot with the 8-4. So here's my take on this whole situation. I think that I've presented an enormous amount of evidence that shows that Mike was somehow able to see the cards. And I think the most glaring thing, again, that I continue to come back to is the fact that when someone who is such a bluffer, and again, I've put a link into other streams where they've shown, like Jeff Boski's video, how much Mike actually bluffed, even though we only went over a few hands. When there's someone that actually bluffs at that frequency, there should be another side to that where he's actually bluffing into strong hands. The issue here is that there aren't any. During the period of time when the poker community actually thinks that he can see the cards, we can't come up with one major bluff where he's actually bluffed into someone holding a strong hand. And that is virtually impossible. So for the other side, people at Stones, Justin Curitis, whoever, to say that the poker community is cherry picking the hands, show me a hand where he bluffs into a strong range. Show me a hand where he loses a lot of money by making a wrong decision. I'm not cherry picking anything. I mean, this is from thousands and thousands of hours of work from the people in the poker community finding these hands. I'm open to seeing the other side of it, but I think it's absolutely egregious for whoever to go about saying that cheating here didn't happen. Now, I don't know who was involved besides Mike. Some people have asked me about Justin. They're like, is he in on it? Is he on it? I've always said, I don't know. In fact, I've actually even said, I don't think he's in on it. I just think he's incredibly incompetent and oblivious. And from some of his behavior this week, I think that confirms on it. He might be, but I certainly don't have evidence that he's in on it. But he's drinking the Kool-Aid somehow that Mike didn't know what the cards were on the live stream that he controlled. So he's guilty of gross incompetence. And the fact that he doesn't think that Mike cheated on this live stream demonstrates that he has absolutely no business being in the gaming sector because he can't differentiate between luck and impropriety. And the other thing too, and I haven't seen Stones as an organization come out and say this, but I think that if they are going to go sort of along with the public narrative that the people who, sued them in the court case are sore losers and that no cheating ever went on, the purpose of this video is to demonstrate that they should not be able to have that narrative. And if they continue to have that narrative, they should just be laughed out of the industry. Because I can tell you with 99.99999% certainty that Mike could see the cards in these particular hands. The other thing, too, is that if you were to ask maybe the top 100 poker players in the world, I can guarantee you that 100 out of 100, especially if they watch what I've presented, are going to say, yes, this guy could see the cards. it's not just one hand that you take a look at and you decide. It's the whole collection of hands.